Hey Lee, hi, how are you?
I'm good, Marcus. How are you?
I'm good too. Where are you right now? You look like you're in your office, but is that one of those virtual backgrounds, or does your house look like your office?
Well, it does. It basically is my office, or certainly for the past 3 months it has been. But no, I'm at my home in London, where I've been for the past, I don't know, 10, 12 weeks. But it kind of does look a bit like my showroom, and it sort of acts a bit like that. I always get the first things that we've made or prototypes, and they come here, and then people take stuff away. So it's constantly changing. It looks different every other month. Yeah. So.
Well, I suppose as a furniture and lighting designer, it would be a bit weird if you didn't have your own products in your
Well,
house.
this is true. Although, like my partner says to me whenever I'm like, oh, maybe I'd like to buy this or buy that. And he's like, no, 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 you should design it. You should design it. I'm like, I don't want to wait 2 years for it. I just want to buy this item now. So I try and get, other designers' work and vintage pieces in here. I don't want everything Lee Broom. I think that would be a little bit, too much.
Well, then presumably you get a nice discount on Lee Broom products.
Yeah, I get a very generous discount actually. So, we're all good there. I don't need to buy anybody else's lights, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm sorted.
So Lee, anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to this special screen time edition of our daily live chats for Virtual Design Festival. But yeah, tell us all about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, well, I'm Lee Broom. I'm a designer. I design furniture and lighting and accessories. I have my own brand, which is the same name. So we design, manufacture, and produce all of our items, which are sold across the world. And we have two showrooms, one in London, one in New York, and we're specified in hotels, bars, restaurants, and we have around 200 dealers across the world that sell our products. And we've been going for around just over 12 years now. So although it doesn't feel that long.
And you said that you've been at home for the last 3 months. So how has your business managed to get through this time?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, the first 2 weeks were a bit of a plate spinning act. But, once we kind of got to grips with what was happening, it kind of settled down, and touch wood, fortunately, we've been fine. I mean, we have a logistics center and a factory where we do all the assembly and we produce some of the products, but we do all the shipping from there. We had to scale that back, but we could still facilitate orders. And that's kind of getting a little bit more back to normal now. But, we have stock of all of our products, and we have always done that kind of for the past 6 years. So we've always been able to facilitate orders. So even if our manufacturers overseas have closed, we've still been able to kind of, get lights to people's homes if they need them, which has been good.
And we've known each other for a long time and had some fun times together. Let's talk about some of the things that you've done over the years. I mean, I particularly remember your van. You sent a van to Milan, didn't you? I think we did some filming for you or something like that. What year was that? The years are all a bit of a blur at the moment.
That was 2016, and I have a picture of it to show you later on. But we basically decided that after doing a really big show in Milan the year before, I wanted to do something really kind of boutique. So I was just looking at my Lee Broom delivery van, and I was like, well, hang on, why don't we just put the collection in the back of the van, and then we'll just drive it around all the design districts. So that's what we did. I kind of recreated this Italian palazzo in the back of our van, and we drove it from Shoreditch all the way to Milan, and we pitched up outside everybody's design show all week, and parties as well. So we had a party with Dezeen outside Bar Basso, if I remember rightly, where we pulled up the van and kind of everybody sort of congregated around it and got very drunk, if I remember rightly.
I remember it well.
I don't think you do.
Oh no, I do. I was the only one who wasn't drunk, just observing everyone else. Interestingly, Tom Dixon has just launched a kind of mobile showroom. He's got a van and he's put a sort of showroom in a van, and his thinking is that if he can't go to fairs and people can't come to see him and things like that, then in this lockdown period, he can then at least take his work to various places and set it up in public spaces. So maybe the kind of design showroom in a van is something that has a renewed relevance?
Well, you know, I mean, it's probably one of my most popular shows, and I didn't think it would be at the time. You know, it wasn't certainly our most extravagant, but it was a sort of cool idea. And the thing is that it hadn't been done before in Milan. I think that's the key. People hadn't seen it, or certainly not in that way. So, and it turned out to be really cool because, you know, we didn't have huge fees to hire sort of like, you know, massive spaces. All we needed was a car park space. And sometimes we'd kind of arrange where we were going to go, and sometimes we'd just pull up where we wanted to. But, you know, it was great because we were bringing it to the people. So some people saw it once and some people saw it every single day. So it is kind of a smart idea. I guess, you know, it's been like there's sort of like mobile libraries, you know, you're bringing books to the people rather than having to venture out. And certainly now I guess it's quite a good idea. It's a, you know, like a trunk show, do you know what I mean? Where you used to pack your trunk and then you'd go and see your dealers. It's the same sort of thing, I guess.
Did you get many parking tickets in Milan?
We did, you know, they're militant about that in Milan. You know, the municipality, we did all these arrangements for like weeks beforehand. And of course, when you get there, there's like 4 cars parked in your way and you're just kind of calling the council to try and get them towed away. So it just added to the kind of beautiful chaos of it all, I guess.
We did a collaboration with a car brand in Milan quite a long time ago now. And the idea was to get some shots of the car driving past landmarks in Milan. And we went down to central Milan, I think it was a Sunday morning, and miraculously, all the streets were completely empty. We couldn't believe our luck. And it turned out it was because the Italian, the Milanese cycle race was about to happen later that day. we got busted so badly by cameras for breaking the parking rules, but they didn't turn up for about a year. We thought we'd got away with it, and suddenly we got all these summonses about a year later.
Oh, there must have been a backlog. Was that during Milan?
Yeah, it was the weekend before the fair started, yeah.
Right, well, there's always like a marathon or a cycle race or sort of like the low emissions thing where you can't drive your car. It doesn't matter what day it falls on, it has to happen. Yeah, that kind of almost happens every year, I feel. Somebody has a story like that.
And then I remember going to an amazing dinner in Ventura Centrale in one of the railway arches in Milan a couple of years ago, when you'd set up this sort of merry-go-round thing, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, that was our 10-year anniversary called Time Machine, where we sort of took my favorite products from the past 10 years and basically changed everything into white and created this modernist fairground carousel. And it was an incredible space, wasn't it? It's kind of in the sort of vaults of the Milano Central Station. And that was the first time that they'd used those before. Yeah, and we decided to do a dinner for sort of friends and colleagues and press. And yeah, it was really beautiful. And they did an amazing job at the dinner because there was no electricity in the space. Everything was done on a generator. So it kind of had this other complication that we sort of deal with for that. But, you know, that's also Milan as well. I love the fact that you've got these weird and wonderful spaces that people sort of like, you know, take over. It's great.
No electricity and no toilets either, if I remember.
Yes, there were no toilets, unfortunately. So everybody just had to hold it in, unfortunately.
And I guess it partly to do with your time machine theme. Each place at the dinner had a picture of that person taken quite a long time ago. I don't know how you found the one of me with very, very long hair in my hippie phase. Yeah,
no, well, you were lucky because you had a very cool picture. Not everybody did. There were some comedy ones in there as well. So yeah, you know, it was nice. I mean, I miss that about Milan, that kind of like people getting together and having those dinners and having drinks at Bar Basso and stuff. But, you know, we'll be back.
We'll be back. And that's why, in a way, I guess why we're doing this live chat with you, because like so many other designers, you've not been able to show at Milan, you've not been able to show in New York. But let's have a look at your presentation, Lee. Let's have a look at your work and see if there's any new stuff you've been up to.
Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. So I mean, there's not a whole lot of new stuff here, but really it's kind of answering the question that most people ask me, is kind of like, how did you get into design? But also, how did you become a design entrepreneur? How did you start your own business? And I've had an unusual background, from being in theatre to fashion, interiors, and each of those different disciplines have influenced me as a designer, but they've also shaped the way that I run my business as well. So that's what I wanted to go through here, in addition to showing you projects and some of my favorite products. So really, my career started from a very, very young age, and that's a publicity photograph from when I was a child actor. And I was actually a professional actor from the age of 7 till I was 17 years old. I performed in a lot of TV shows and film and radio, and particularly worked a lot in theatre. So that image is me performing at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I was actually a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company from the age of 10 till I was 16. And that's me and Richard III with the actor Anton Lesser, which you might well recognise from the Game of Thrones. So, you know, this wasn't a hobby, it was a profession. It was something that I was going to continue into my adulthood, and something that I was very passionate about. But I also had a passion for design. My dad is an artist and he taught me how to draw. And I had a particular interest in fashion. And when I was 17, I entered a competition called the Young Designer of the Year Award for fashion, which was judged by Vivienne Westwood. I won the competition, and I got to meet Vivienne at the awards ceremony afterwards. And I kind of, when I think about it now, well, it wasn't stupid, but at the time it felt stupid. I went over to her with an autograph book and a pen, and I was like, "Oh, Miss Westwood, can I have your autograph?" And she sort of snapped it off me, and then she wrote her phone number down. And she said, "Look, if you want to get into the industry, if you want to be a fashion designer, why don't you come to the studio for a couple of days and just see how things work?" So I was straight there, I think 2 weeks later, and I was fortunate enough to spend 2 whole weeks with her, but in her own office, just me, just her, for 2 whole days. She talked about her inspirations from the history of art, from literature, how she'd look back to historical pattern cutting and pattern cutting techniques from the 17th and 18th century and putting them into contemporary clothing. And I was just mesmerized. You know, these were my formative years, and I was so inspired. And by the end of the 2 days, I showed her a portfolio of sketches that I'd been doing. Here are a couple of pages from the sketches. And after she closed the book, she said, "Right, well, if you want to work here as an intern, you can stay as long as you want. We can't pay you. But if it all goes well, we'll take you to Paris as well." So I ended up spending just over 10 months working at Westwood's in the studio in Battersea. And I got taken to Paris. It was in 1995, so it was the kind of era of the supermodel. And that is actually the outfit that I dressed Kate Moss in for Vivienne's On Liberty collection in 1995, I think it was. And, you know, so this massively inspired me. I just decided, okay, I want to go into fashion. I loved theatre, but, you know, this became a huge passion for me. And I decided to enroll into Central St. Martin's to do my degree in fashion design, women's wear. But actually, this was sort of against the advice of Vivienne in a way, because she sort of said to me, you know, if you want to do this, you don't need to go to a school. You know, you can do it on your own. You'll sort of be homogenized. You'll be packed in. You'll be sort of condensed in the way that you need to think. But I didn't take her advice. I decided to go anyway, but in a roundabout way, I guess I did take her advice in the long run, because I'm not formally trained in products and interiors. So I did kind of end up working in an industry that I wasn't formally trained in. But I enjoyed my experience at St. Martin's. This is actually one of the pieces I designed for my final collection. And you can kind of see the sort of product designer in there, actually, sort of even at that point. But then I made a transition into interiors. And the reason that happened was because in my final year at St. Martin's, I was completely broke. I needed to make some money, and I was into kind of interiors and doing up my flat and things like this. And I decided to go to bars and restaurants and sort of walk in and say, oh, can I give you some interiors advice? Or, you know, I used to make cushions and do upholstery and curtains and do paint effects. And I got in with a group of bar owners, and this sort of turned into a bit of a side business where I was doing these odd jobs, kind of interiors jobs. And then in 2000, just after I graduated, one of the bar owners asked me to design a whole venue from scratch. And this was the space. It was called Nylon. It was in the city in Moorgate. I enlisted the help of a friend of mine called Mackie, who I went to St. Martin's with. And we were thrown into the deep end. I mean, we really didn't know what we were doing. And it was a 10-month-long project. It had a budget of £750,000. We were working with architects. We were project managing. We did the space planning, the colour scheme. We designed a lot of furniture and the lighting pieces. And I guess it was like an intense training course on a live interiors project. And after it opened, it got nominated for Evening Standard Bar of the Year award. And then we just started getting offered all this interiors work. So I guess I faced another challenge. You know, up until that point, I wanted to be a fashion designer. I always wanted to work for myself. That's always the kind of main thing. I wanted to have my own brand. I didn't want to work for another brand. And most of the jobs were in Paris working for other brands. And then here was a career where I could have my own business. There's no major startup costs. And my vision that I have in my head can be sort of exercised in reality. It can be out there. And I just thought that was an incredible opportunity. So myself and Mackie set up a company called Mackie Lee Design. And we successfully designed restaurants and bars in London and the UK for the next 4 years. And we were pretty well known within the bar industry, but in 2006, Mackie decided that she wanted to move back to her native Japan. And I decided that I wanted to start my own brand under my own name. And I didn't want to focus on interiors. I wanted to launch a furniture and lighting collection. So in 2007, I launched my first collection, which was called Neo Neon, and it debuted at the Brick Lane Gallery as part of the London Design Festival. And that was really the launch of Lee Broom. It was a collection of 6 pieces, antique furniture pieces, which were adorned in and outlined in 3-dimensional hand-bent neon lighting. They were limited edition pieces, and they were kind of, I guess, more art furniture pieces. And it was sort of a reaction to the durability that you have to focus on commercial interiors. I just had this idea, I wanted to make a statement, and I put it out there. Anyway, it became successful. It sold pretty well, but it photographed especially well. And we got a lot of publicity, a lot of press. We got quite a few orders, and it enabled me to then really produce a collection every year during the London Design Festival, and then obviously later in Milan and New York. So the collections that followed really kind of focused on that idea of British craft. I sort of kind of pulled together a team or sort of British craftspeople that I was working with, and I became very inspired by that idea. And it was during the recession as well. So this was a period where a lot of companies had stopped working with a lot of sort of bigger brands because things had moved to China. So they had to diversify and work with kind of smaller designers like myself, but on smaller runs. So I worked in pieces such as carpet weaving and parquetry, woodwork, tiles and ceramics. And then this continued until 2012 when I released the Crystal Bulb. And I guess this was really the piece that took me out of the sort of design, being known in the design community to being in the public consciousness. It became a huge product for us, and it's still one of our biggest selling products. And I think the reason why is because of one thread that runs through a lot of my work, which is that idea of familiarity. It's kind of taking something that you've seen before and presenting it in a way that you've not quite seen. So in this sense, it's kind of taking the industrial light bulb and combining it with decorative cut crystal and putting them together in a way that hadn't been done before. And people like those aesthetics, and there's something nostalgic about it, and it became incredibly popular. It also was the first time that we started using LED technology in some of our products as well. So we created our own LED light bulb in a very small size, which was dimmable. And, you know, I think that was kind of, this was one of the first things that was sort of happening in LED technology at that point. And also we still wanted it to be handcrafted. I mean, I wanted to create an accessible product, and a product that, you know, kind of had the same sensibility of some of our kind of more high-end pieces. It's still hand blown, it's still hand cut, it's still handcrafted. And I think that's why it became successful. So I think the company at this point really sort of took off. And in 2013, we opened our Shoreditch showroom and our design studio. My partner, Charles, then came into the company to work with us full time, and he started looking after all the business aspects and the logistics and the distribution, so that I could really kind of focus more on the creative and the marketing. And as the company grew, the products grew as well, the collections grew. The aesthetics of the collections developed as well. And this was something that I really kind of wanted to focus on, and I guess stems back from my training in fashion. In fashion, you change the look seasonally, you experiment and you adapt, but the overarching house style is still the same. So I didn't want to stick with crystal. I started to want to work with sort of more modern silhouettes, this idea of balance and simple forms, metallic finishes, and also the idea of balance, but in a kind of more playful quality, and kind of maybe sort of stepping back to a more sort of mid-century aesthetic with the products. And also the idea of optical illusion with our shadow collection, for instance, where we have products on one side, they have a brass fascia, and then on the other side, they turn into walnut wood as you start to walk around the piece. And materiality was obviously still very important. We did a lot of products in marble, in this case, Carrara marble. This is probably one of my favorite pieces. It's a piece of solid marble that's milled to 5 millimeters thick, and then it has an LED tube inside, so it makes the marble transparent. And I hadn't seen that in Carrara marble at that point. I'd only seen it in alabaster, but it's like a luxury futuristic version of a kind of industrial fluorescent tube, if you like. And then one of our other really successful products, the Crescent Light. And this again has the same kind of design ethos, although different looking to the crystal bulb. That idea of taking something you've seen before, and in this case, a kind of 1920s globe light, but then it has one simple twist. And in this case, it's sliced asymmetrically and it's shifted to reveal these two brass fascias. So, you know, you've kind of seen it before, but not quite in this way. So people instantly have that kind of familiarity with the product. And in terms of them producing our pieces, everything always starts with a sketch. I mean, I sketch constantly all the time. That sketch then turns into a 3D visualization. We make models, some of them quite advanced, some of them incredibly crude. We make CAD drawings, CAD models, and then we produce prototype after prototype, and then eventually the sample, and then go into production. That process really does take, as I said earlier, 2 years to get it from the sketchbook and then into a customer's home or into the store. So during this period, as well as the collections getting larger, so were the shows. And this was a show that we put on in 2015 in Milan called the Department Store. And I basically saw a row of disused shops on Via Capellini, and I decided to turn it into a Lee Broom department store. So you had every sort of department there, from millinery to ladies' accessories to a bookshop to a wine shop, but everything blown out in grey, except for the products themselves, which were in their natural finishes or kind of very vibrant colours. And it was a real experiential show. And I feel that that kind of wanting to do that stems from my theatre background. The idea of seeing everything as a presentation, what you put on as a performance, and making it engaging for somebody who's walking around. I think it's probably one of my favorite parts of the jobs, is putting on these shows and presentations. And then obviously we talked about this earlier, our Milan van, as it got to be known. Its actual name of the show was Salone dell'Automobile. But, you know, one of our most popular shows the following year after department store, but as I mentioned before, very much scaled back. A lot of people, when they see this photograph now, think it's all photoshopped. It's quite interesting. The other show you talked about as well was our time machine Carousel, which was a beautiful presentation. And then last year, actually, we presented our landmark show in Sydney, Australia, a show called Park Life. And it was one of our biggest exhibitions. We hung over 100 lights, and it was a contemporary take on an 18th century pleasure garden. So we created this maze with gravel, and within the maze were around 16 different rooms that showcased all the products in kind of these sort of modernist take on 18th century, which is a period of history that I'm quite fascinated in. And then also every year we show during London Design Festival. This presentation from 2016 called Opticality kind of took everybody on this sort of like immersive mirrored illusion with all of our optical lights. And every single year we try to completely transform the showroom so it's unrecognizable from the year before. And it obviously goes back to a showroom straight afterwards. But I like that people walk in, you know, this is the same space. This is from last year, Kaleidoscope, but they walk in and they're like, oh, was I here last year or was I somewhere else? But, you know, shows like this I love to do. And this is kind of like I guess like an artistic expression of a product that we sell a lot of. And as well as creating a beautiful installation, what I'm trying to do here is show the versatility of the product itself, in that it can be hung in many different ways, vertically, horizontally, forward, back. I launched it in Milan in 2018 as part of our Observatory collection, and it's become our biggest selling product ever. And I think one of the reasons for this is because it gives the designers the opportunity to put their own stamp on the piece. Similarly, like we have with our Aurora light, we created our own filament light bulb for this product, which is reeded glass. And then the chandelier, although supersized, it's actually scalable, so you can create your own tiers if you like. I think that idea of like the classic product being the same throughout time, people are kind of wanting to change a little bit with that. People are wanting things bigger, smaller, different colors. Can I have this bespoke, and can I have this customized? So this is allowing me to do this, but still having full control over the product. And there you have the presentation.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
So what was behind your decision to launch a design brand under your own name? I mean, there aren't that many designers who've successfully launched under their own name and make product themselves. I mean, obviously there's lots of design studios named after the founder and they work for multiple other brands. Why did you decide to go down that route, and how did you pull it off? Because lots of people also haven't managed to do that. I mean, you think of Tom Dixon is probably the one that you think of as who's managed to build a global brand around his name, but there's not many others apart from you.
Well, it just didn't occur to me not to do it. And I do think probably that's to do with my fashion background, because a lot of fashion designers have their own brands and their own labels. So I'd kind of been conditioned in that way. And it didn't occur to me to work for other designers at all. It seemed, so when people started asking me, are you going to do something for Moroso or do something for Cartel? And I was just like, okay, I hadn't thought about that. And a lot of, you know, when I did talks, design students would say to me at the end of the talk, how do I get to work for Moroso? And I'll be like, well, I don't know. I don't phone up, I'm not sure. But, you know, now it's completely different. Design students say to me, how do I start my own business? How do I start my own brand? And, you know, for me at the time, I had kind of two skills. One was interiors and one was products. And this is what I say to students is that you have to be able to diversify. You can't just do the one thing. You know, it needs a lot of startup costs to create products and collections. So I was still doing interiors at the same time and consultation for interiors. And then eventually the products started to overtake the interiors in terms of financially. And so I was able to continue. And you just have to be smart as you go along. You can't do a huge collection every year. You need to kind of ebb and flow. But it's not easy, of course. It isn't. It's a plate spinning act.
And where do you manufacture?
All over the world. I mean, we do some manufacture in the UK. We do all of our assembly in our factory in East London. We have product made in Czech Republic, in Italy, in Poland, Germany, and in the Far East. So it's wherever we feel that the best type of manufacturing for that specific type of product or part can be made.
And that sounds like an awful lot of work to find the suppliers, to check the quality control. How do you pull that off as a relatively small company?
Yeah, I mean, we have a product development team. That's our biggest team. There's about 6 of them, and they constantly just work with all the manufacturers. And we have a meeting twice a week. I'm at that meeting once a week, and we just talk about the products and where it's going, because you are having to manage a lot of different suppliers. But as I say, we try as much as we can to take as much of the control internally. So we're starting to build up more of the assembly within our own space as much as we can, because it's important for us to have stock of the products. When somebody orders them, we like to get them out fairly quickly. But it is challenging, and you do often move suppliers from product to product. You know, the crystal bulb started in the UK. It became too big for the factory there, and then we moved to the Czech Republic. You know, it's still made in exactly the same way, except it's not just Brenda on the machine doing the cutting. There's like 30 Brendas doing the cutting on the bulb. So, you know, you go to wherever you can find the best possible manufacturers.
And then the distribution as well is where a lot of brands fall down. They might have amazing products, the price point might be just right, but if you can't get it into the stores in the right places at the right time, you're kind of struggling, aren't you? So how did you pull that off?
It's just part of growing. I mean, a lot of distributors and a lot of dealers, you know, they want to see how you start as a company. So the first few years I was kind of like, oh, why aren't we in here? And why aren't we in that store? You know, but obviously people want to see that you're going to last more than 3 years. They know how difficult the industry can be. And I think that they watch you, and you just keep in a very sort of casual contact with them. We see all these dealers at shows, and then when they're ready to take you on board, they'll take you on board. And it has to be a mutual thing, because they obviously have to invest in the brand and have a significant kind of showcase for you, or have people kind of on the ground going out and meeting architects and designers, because they're representing you as a brand. So there is a lot of training that we have to do with them, and we have the very fancy flight cases that they can go out with, sort of all the products in foam that they can show clients. So there's a whole other machine around, you know, in the background operating.
And it's interesting you said how important it is for you to hold stock, so that if somebody orders something, you can ship it to them right away. Because I did an live interview with Tom Dixon a couple of weeks ago, and he said he's moving the other way, that having stock means you've got to have a supply chain, which of course during these troubled times is difficult if you're waiting for stuff to arrive from overseas, that there's a cost in keeping it on the warehouse, and that, you know, he's done a collaboration with a brand where every product is configured online and ordered so that everyone gets the product that they want rather than the same product as everyone else. So you're going down a different route. How do you make that work in these difficult times?
Well, one of the things is that we own the distribution center. So we set up the logistics center ourselves rather than outsourcing that. So again, we have complete control over what stock comes in and what stock goes out. I think when you often sort of give that to a third party, you sort of lose some of the control of that. And especially in a scenario that we're going through at the moment, you know, we were still able to kind of operate as a skeleton team, but very safely, and keep things moving. You know, I mean, again, that was very difficult to do initially. And I was like, oh God, do we want to do this? It's kind of like a lot of work, but I understand the benefits of it now. I understand how important it is. If you own as many aspects of the business yourself, you know, it's only you that can answer to it, you know? So that, I think that worked for us.
And you mentioned a couple of times you linked your background in theatre, and obviously the fashion industry is very theatrical. It's very much about the way things are presented. And you said that you see everything as a performance or as a presentation. So when you're developing products, do you think about the way that you're going to launch and market to them at the same time? or does that kind of the show concept come afterwards?
Initially, I'm thinking about the product. So the focus is the product. And then at some point in that very initial stage, however, the idea of shows will start to appear. You know, if you're designing a light fixture, I'm thinking of how many multiple ways it could be hung. And then sometimes I have an idea for a show that might kind of inspire a product, or the two will come together. So there's always like 5 or 6 different kind of concept for shows or things happening at any time. But I kind of, it's one of my favorite parts of it is kind of the designing part is my favorite part. Sketching I absolutely love, and kind of playing music and just thinking of the whole ambience, the theatricality, whether it's huge or whether it's kind of very subtle, kind of plays in there, because I do think this is a representation of the brand. It's also a representation of me, you know. I was the same when I was at university. I'd spend my last penny on, you know, my projects for my critiques, you know, just to make sure that they were beautifully presented, and you know, then I wouldn't be able to eat for the rest of the month. But you know, it's the same now. The budgets are a little bit bigger, but you know, I love that part of it. It's an expression of me as a designer and an artist, and as the brand, and that's it. Really, kind of, it's one of the reasons why I think the products are popular, because people are seeing them in so many different ways, or ways that they didn't think that they should. And of course, we still have to show people this is how it looks either side of a bed, and this is how it looks above a dining table. So you kind of got to get all of those aspects in. But I am thinking about that from the beginning, for sure.
Actually, you've kind of preempted my next question, which was going to be, obviously you love thinking about how it's going to be presented, but does that help the business? Does seeing your product in a van in the streets of Milan end up giving you more orders? I mean, it definitely gets you more press, that's, that's probably for sure, but does that definitely end up getting you more sales, which at the end of the day is, I guess, what you want?
Well, you have to kind of also do something that's more commercial as well, you know. So we have our showrooms. We opened a showroom in London, which we photograph regularly, and then one in New York as well. Before we opened the showroom in New York, we did a pop-up, which was more of a kind of a sort of showroom setting, and a project that we're working on in New York, which is going to open later on the year, really showcases the products in more of a residential style, which kind of people have seen a bit less from us. So, but you're right, you do have to kind of push that kind of information out to people, because obviously not everybody can translate light in the back of a van into light in a living room. So, and the great thing is because we sell a lot of our products to designers, they put their work online. So we're always kind of collating images of the products in situ so that people can see how they look. If you look at my Instagram, I mean, a lot of the pictures are mainly the products in a beautiful interior setting. Yeah.
And you showed a picture of that sort of mirrored show in your showroom. I can't remember how many years ago that was now, but that was just at the beginning of the time when people were starting to talk about Instagrammability. You were on that already. You were thinking about how people would come in and take their own pictures of that space.
Yeah, well, I did, you know, in all honesty, I didn't think that, I wasn't thinking about Instagram. I was thinking about the space, but I always think about how it looks when it's going to be photographed. What I actually didn't consider is that people would be taking pictures of themselves in there. I kind of forgot about the whole selfie thing, and that's the honest truth. And we ended up with queues down the street for the exhibition. I mean, it was crazy. There was so many photographs taken of that show. And then funnily enough, the next year I did a show called On Reflection, where we presented an interior of a room with a mirror, a huge mirror, but it was a fake mirror. There was actually 2 rooms set up, and this was actually an opening. But we'd done it so perfectly, even with the fireplace and chairs and lights, and the description of the exhibition put backwards in the other room, so it was mirrored. And people would walk in and they'd look and they'd be like, oh, this looks nice. And then they'd be like, go take a picture. And then they'd be like, oh, where am I? Where? They couldn't see themselves. And even then, when we kind of had to sort of remind them, they're sort of touching it, you know, is this camera trickery? What is it? And it's like, no, it's an old Victorian magic trick, basically. But the funny thing is that we had no pictures taken that year of the exhibition because nobody was in them. So you know, there you go. It's kind of like the opposite side of the coin there.
And how are you adapting to not being able to have shows then, given that the way that you present your work is so geared around people's experience of it, people taking a picture, people press covering it, people talking about it? How are you how have you adapted to the kind of virtual world we're living in right now?
Well, you know, initially, because we had some wonderful shows planned, and initially I was kind of like, oh God, that is annoying, you know, because we kind of already done so much preparation. And then as it started to kind of, you know, as I started to get used to the idea, I kind of thought, okay, well, look, here's an opportunity to kind of really start thinking differently. If we are going to start presenting things online or sort of more virtually, well, it kind of opens up a whole nother bag of tricks. And I think we were going to go in that direction anyway, right? But maybe in the next 5 years, I think nobody anticipated this needed to happen overnight. So it's going to be a real test of people's creativity and how far ahead you can kind of zoom your brain into the future and go, right, this is how it should look. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see what people start coming up with. I have a few ideas, so and I have new products to launch, which I haven't been able to. So I think later on in the year, we'll see how that plans out for us. But it's exciting. It's a new challenge.
So what could that be? Lee Broom in VR or movies or whatever? Are you allowed to give us any kind of hint of what you've got planned?
Well, I mean, I do think it needs to be a combination of reality and non-reality. I just don't think, you know, we are dealing with products, furniture and lighting here. It can't all be rendered at this point. But I think that there could be a mix of that potentially. But we'll see, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of in the initial stages of working on that and coming up with ideas. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with fashion weeks as they start to happen virtually, and particularly what some of the big brands do. So yeah, but I don't think everybody wants to see me on the screen virtually with the you know, whatever I'm designing. Who knows? Maybe they should. I don't know. We'll see.
And you know, fairs, particularly Milan, has been so central to the way you've built the image of your company. How important do you think events like that will be in the future? Do you think we will all be back in Milan next year as if nothing happened, or do you think there'll be a kind of a real change in the way that those events take place and the things that people like you get out of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a change because we'll probably be forced to. I don't even know what the landscape's going to look like next April. You know, we could be in the same position next year as we were this year. Who knows? But I think there does have to be a bit of a shift. I do think people do need to be able to kind of meet up physically and see product physically as well. Funnily enough, it's particularly important for people in the States, less so in Europe, to see physical products, to see samples, to be able to touch things, to sit in them, to illuminate them. You know, you can't just work virtually in that respect. I think there'll be a mix. I think it will just be interesting. I mean, I have no idea how it will look, but I do believe it will have an impact on it. I think we'll see some wonderful, interesting presentations that we wouldn't have seen before, and we may see some very terrible ones too. Who knows?
So you mentioned that you've got some products to launch this year, and I can't remember whether you said how you and where you were going to do those. There's going to be an online element, but will there be shows in your showroom for limited numbers of people, or what? How will you do that now?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to probably, I mean, the next kind of show on the calendar for us would be London Design Festival. And we would definitely like to have some sort of presence in that. And at the moment, that seems like it's kind of going ahead. And I think that will be kind of an interesting first show to see how this can work out. I believe it will probably be a show just for people in the UK rather than international visitors. We always do something in our showroom, so it's there, people will walk past, we will always do something, whether they come in or not, I don't know. We might create something that's just a kind of extravagant window display. And then on top of that, like I say, I think we'll probably maybe create something a little more virtually, probably around film and photography, kind of focus our efforts in that sort of medium rather than the physical ones, and then find interesting ways of launching those as well. But yeah, we have plenty of products coming out for later this year, and it's all furniture, so no lighting this year.
And beyond that, what other plans have you got? Do you plan to open a restaurant or?
No. No.
So furniture and lighting, you're happy with the furniture and lighting? No,
Yeah.
no greater empire plans for Lee Broom.
Well, you know, look, I mean, everybody has those kind of secret fantasy ideas of opening a bar or a restaurant and a hotel. And like, you know, thank God we actually didn't start, you know, kind of putting the wheels in motion on that, you know, but I also know how difficult it is, having worked with so many clients in interiors doing, you know, setting up projects like that. But for me, I think there's a lot more that I haven't designed yet, you know. I mean, there is kind of more, I'd like to just do more collaborative work. I want to do more sort of work in maybe kind of technology or sound and vision. I'd like to produce more shows in a more theatrical sense, you know, like an actual performance, I think would be something that I would be really suited to. And just continue to grow the brand. I just want to improve on what we're doing. I don't want to change and diversify into something else. I just want to continue producing good work that people enjoy and expanding more, I guess.
And final question, do you ever regret that you didn't pursue the fashion thing?
No. I mean, there are elements of fashion that I do miss for sure. But I think having now worked in this industry that we're in and knowing people who work in fashion, and it's a very, very challenging industry, not just from a creative perspective, but from a business perspective as well. I'm very happy that I made this choice. And, there's been a lot of work, of course, but I feel incredibly lucky to be able to do what I do.
No Lee Broom accessory range coming out soon?
Well, there might be that, who knows?
All right, Lee, it's been brilliant talking to you. I hope
Yeah.
I get to see you in the real world before too long.
So too.
Well, you're only down the road, actually, so
No,
that's
exactly.
more likely than with Nerian who I was just talking to from Shanghai in the near future. But
if we do meet again, are you going to bring that screen behind you with you? That should become everywhere you go now.
We've just been talking about that. I think it's time to move towards an actual studio rather than a green screen.
Oh, okay. Well, you might need some lights then.
Yes, yeah, we're going to work on that. I think this is going to become a permanent fixture in the office, the broadcast studio.
Yeah, good idea.
It's a bit ramshackle at the moment. The green screen is kind of creased and got masking tape.
Sins, yeah.
Exactly. All right, Lee, great to speak.
Great to see you too, Marcus. Bye.
Take care. Bye.